Perfect. Today for Ignite, we talk about the art of negotiation. Now, Josh, I can't see you, but I have a feeling you might be rolling your eyes and saying, why would we need to learn about negotiation? And why does that take a whole Ignite class? Maybe you're not, maybe I'm just picking on you because I can't see you.
No,
But
not at all.
so let's just start out with the basics. How do you guys define negotiation? And maybe let's take it a step further. Negotiation in our job. How would you define that? I'm making you guys think today.
I
Like,
mean that is basically our job in the whole negotiating, coming to terms of to make a deal.
Okay, good. So discussing terms, right, is what you're
Right.
saying, making a deal for both sides. Do you have anything to add to that, Dominique?
I'd say like maybe taking two differing opinions and coming to an agreement or helping others come to an agreement.
Definitely. I mean, literally, it's interesting if you even look at, not that I do this all the time, but if type into Google negotiation, you see different definitions depending on the industry it's coming from. For instance, in Investopedia, it says negotiation is a strategic discussion that resolves an issue in a way that both parties find acceptable. Sounds about right. It also says in a negotiation, each party tries to persuade the other to agree with his or her point of view. So, what can I do to get you to agree with me? Right? And it says by negotiating, all involved parties try to avoid arguing but agree to reach some sort of compromise. Interesting. So, I want to talk about negotiation, and we're going to go into exactly what it is and where we negotiate the most in our business. Then we're going to go into at what times and yeah, just like I said, at what period we use negotiation most often. What are the terms or what are the components of negotiation? We're going to look at some rules around the communication side of how to be an effective negotiator. And just as fair warning, I'm going to ask you guys a few more questions about negotiation to make this a discussion. Sound cool?
Yeah.
Cool. Buckle up. Just kidding. So another question I have, just a little thought-provoking question here is, what does being a good negotiator have to do with being a good leader? How might those two things be related? What do you guys think?
I'm gonna say I think one element of it is like making each side feel acknowledged and heard. And I feel like good leaders care about the people that they're leading a lot. And so it's like showing people that you really are hearing them and trying to, fulfill their needs, I think is something both do.
Great point. That's a good point. So rephrasing that, or if I understand you, hear you correctly, you're saying leader will understand the needs of others where they feel cared for, right? And maybe others want to follow because they feel that leader has their best interest at heart.
Yeah.
Awesome. So Elizabeth, the question I just posed is, what is being, today we're talking about the art of negotiation and why it's so important in our jobs. And I posed the question, what does being a good negotiator have to do, or how is it related to being a good leader? One thing that Dominique just said, if you heard me rephrasing, what she had said is, again, correct me if I'm wrong, Dominique, but a good leader, like their followers or individuals feel that that leader cares for what their needs are, right? So in negotiation, of course, if they feel like I'm not maybe posturing the whole time, but I'm trying to figure out what's in the best interest of both sides, right? And they feel cared for. So anyone want to add anything additional to that? How does being a good leader relate to being a good negotiator and vice versa? Deep thought questions at 1 o'clock.
I know. Gosh.
Well, I think to be a good leader, you have to have confidence, and I think that's a big thing of negotiating too.
When you say confident, why is that important? It sounds like scripting. Why is that important to you, Josh?
Well, just because when somebody's doing something and they're confident about doing it, it makes like the client feel at ease. You know, if you feel confident. Same thing with leadership. Um, if your leader is not, uh, putting off confidence, you lose confidence in him too. Like, or in them, I should say, not him.
So maybe going along with that, having knowledge, right, of
Yep.
how to help people and creating action steps to move forward that others can have confidence in, right, in the leader.
Right.
They're having confidence in themselves.
Or even,
Go ahead, Elizabeth. What were you going to say?
or even not having so much the knowledge, but knowing your resources. I feel like that's been a huge thing for me in all of my jobs with leadership and management is don't bullshit people. You know, don't just throw bullshit at them. They'd actually rather hear, you know what? I've got a fabulous resource. Let me go back to that and get back to you. They would much rather hear that. And that's where the trust is ruined. If you bullshit people, you literally break that trust like that, and it's way harder to earn trust back than it is to kill it. Right?
I love that. So let's say going into next level and with what Josh was saying, maybe not even the knowledge, but the ability to meet people's needs or solve problems, right? And the ability to be vulnerable sometimes and step out and say, of course, I compliment people a lot. I did it, of course, a whole lot in the very beginning of my career. Maybe it was the most obvious question in the world, but I would say, you know what? That is a great question. Just so I can be 110% sure before I get back to you with the answer, like, let me do some research and when can I get back to you tomorrow? And of course, I make sure I call them at that time and follow up when I said I would. Right? So that's what I hear when you say that. That's a great point.
I just use a lot of bullshit in there.
Keep in mind, there are times when I've heard myself say this, I hear agents say this at times, where maybe I'm working with that buyer, that difficult client, that's an air quote, that difficult client, and I hear some people say, oh man, these people, like, they are crazy. Like, why am I working with them, right? And geez, they're just driving me crazy. They call me all the time, things like that. And usually when I find myself using that verbiage, that language, I have to then ask myself, am I leading or do I feel like I'm just reacting to things, right? Are they following me? And are they following my advice? Do they have a reason to follow my advice through negotiation and figuring out what's most important to them? And usually at that point, that's when I'll call a meeting and I'll say, hey, let's get together and let's revisit everything. And I'll first make sure I'm still aligned with what it is that they need. It may sound like, hey, we've been looking for a couple months now, referencing Marcus's class yesterday. Seems like we haven't found the right house with the right drapery for you just yet, and realigning with, what are you looking for in a home? And obviously our plan of attack and our actions aren't leading you closer to that home. Let's take on these new, adapt in this way to our plan of attack or our action plan and I'm going to realign them with getting you into that dream property in the least amount of time possible, right? And then we set like a new course. That's negotiation, but it's also leading. It's figuring out what's most important to them. And if they trust me enough to be able to lead them in that direction. Do you think that's only negotiation? What do you think it happens more with? Our clients, other agents? What do you think? Or all of the above?
What do you think? What happens more with?
Well, negotiation, where does it happen most? Like with our clients, with other agents, equal parts, we're always doing it. Are there other areas in which we're always negotiating? What do you guys think?
I think we're always negotiating, but I would think that most of the negotiation is with other clients.
Yep. And that was in the Ignite video. That's what they had said. It's actually with our clients most often. It's figuring out what do you need, what can we do to get you in that direction, right? A couple other questions I want to ask. So I'm loving the responses, guys. So how do you think your ability to negotiate can affect the outcome? Pretty obvious question, but I want us to think about this. How can your ability to negotiate affect the outcome, both positively and negatively?
Well, I think like I see it even in prospecting because it's like all the time people they jump to conclusions and they make assumptions about what you're trying to do for them, and that's not what it is. So I think your ability to negotiate and clarify and like build a rapport is really important for even just having people to work with at all.
So true. We're negotiating when we meet someone for the first time,
Yeah.
right? A win on my side would be you meeting with me and us discussing your options, right? How can I communicate that to them where they see that a win as well?
Yeah.
Right? Good point. Anyone else have anything to add to that? How can our ability to negotiate affect the outcome?
I think very few things are black and white anymore. I think that negotiation is just kind of par for the course on any relationship. I negotiate with my teens all the time.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's always just kind of but it's a meet in the middle kind of situation. It's identifying, I can't do this, but what I can do is this. Would that be sufficient? I feel like we're not in a gray world, or we're not in a black and white world. So.
And you're reminding me that I remember when we were prospecting, we called this the pit, where we were prospecting, and it's all these standing cubicles next to one another. And we had a group going in one area, and there was an agent. Funny, they were marketing or they were prospecting to the same group. So they all had their expired list. And a lot of times agents will have the same list. And she called someone, and this individual said, yeah, we're not ready to list. We need to paint this bedroom first. And in her eyes, she interpreted that as they need to paint the bedroom. Then in that case, can I follow up with you? When do you think it's going to be done? Is it going to be done, a couple of weeks from now, 3 weeks from now? They said, we'll get back to you. She said, great. Is it okay if I check in with you? They said, that's fine. And this is so funny. Like another gentleman, a guy had called them, these same people. They brought up the same issue. We need to paint these 2 bedrooms, or I can't remember how many bedrooms. And you know what he said? He said, well, I have a painter that I can work with. How about I have my person come over and do the job for you, and we begin working together next week? And they're like, great. Wow. And do you know how upset this girl was? And she just needed to know, a lot of times it's asking the right questions. And by asking those questions, as you said, Dominique, it's if I have the rapport where they're open enough with me to answer those questions, and then I find an opportunity that they may never have thought of. And then I present that and I focus back on the win-win, right? So a lot of times in negotiation, we think, I've got to win, they have to lose, right? I'm going to persuade them or strong arm them or posture up against them where I win and you lose, right? And we become the me monster. It can be that way rarely. However, if I ask questions the right way, there's no reason I can't figure out if we can come to terms and get something that both are open to using. And that's when I'm leading, right? So let's see, a couple other questions just to think about so we can move on, but ask yourself, why is asking questions so important to the art of negotiation, right? Someone else said this, I think you said it, Dominique, in prospecting, a lot of times we assume things. When you invite people to meet, they may assume Dominique is going to come in here and she's going to dominate us and force us to sell our property. She won't leave. It's going to be like a timeshare conversation. Sorry, Josh. Or something that's going to really like strong arm me into doing this. So of course I'm going to resist it, or I'm going to do the brush off thing and say, I'll get back to you, or whatever it is, right? So my ability to ask questions and get people to open up and trust me it directly reflects my ability to negotiate, right? And the way in which I ask questions. We practiced that in scripting earlier today. Okay, one other question, and then I promise we'll move on. Why is it so important to understand contracts when negotiating, in the process of negotiation? And where is that important to understand the paperwork?
You can't negotiate what you don't know. I mean, if you don't know the contract, you have no foundation for your negotiation.
Yeah, you don't know options, right? Like, you don't know what options are out there. Anyone else? Anyone else have anything that I think you may have wrapped it up there? Any other thoughts with that? So yeah, this is why we preach. What is the first contract you want to start becoming familiar with? I hope you guys answer this the right way.
Repsy?
Yes. Points to you. I would throw you a candy bar for your person. Here's a virtual candy bar, but yeah. So definitely understand the Repsy. The reason being, when we're explaining this to our clients, when they're signing the Repsy to put in an offer, we're giving them all the possible options to be able to win out. Especially when working with buyers, it's pretty important nowadays, right? Right. So it may look like me contacting the listing agent, and hopefully you guys have written this question down, but I asked the listing agent, first I say, congratulations on this listing. Looks like a beautiful home. I'm sure I'm one of 1,000 buyers agents contacting you right now. Just very quickly, my clients absolutely love the home and we think we're going to put in an offer. Other than price point, what's most important to your sellers in this transaction and selling the property, right? So I'm asking a very broad question that listing agent can interpret and then answer and say something like, they just want a smooth transaction. They want to work with someone, either if they're bringing all cash or someone that has a really strong pre-approval. Why is that important to them? Because they were under contract before and it fell out of contract, and they want to know this time when they have a buyer, it's going to work out. Great to know. Also asking things around a timeline. Do they need to stay in the home longer to find the next property, or are they looking to move out as soon as possible? Finding out these things and being aware of the Repsy and the options and terms allows me to prepare an offer that perhaps other people haven't, and introduce possible solutions that they haven't. Right? Okay. Anyone have any questions? I've been asking a lot of questions. Anyone have any questions first before we get going into the next portion of it? Or any thoughts? Okay. All right. So there's typically two areas that we're going to look at in negotiation. This can be our own clients. This can also go into working with other agents and a person on the other side of the transaction. Perhaps I'm on the listing side from the buyer standpoint, or as I just mentioned, I'm working with the buyer trying to put an offer in, or maybe I have an accepted offer with the seller. The two general areas that we will negotiate around the most are the price points, the price itself, and the terms. So what are some terms within like the Repsy that you guys can think of? You guys can just fire them off that we may have when we're working through negotiation here. Like, what are some terms we might find in an offer or in the negotiation process that helps us work towards a solution on both sides? Just any term you can think of. And I would say think of the Repsy when I ask this question.
I have a question about that. And like terms, does that mean it could be anything like one person, like the inclusions or exclusions, like one person wants the dryer to be included and the other wants to take it, like things like that?
That's a perfect example. Okay. That's a term where we say, hey, we're coming in with a lower price point. However, we'll let you take the refrigerator, the washer, the dryer with you instead of including it in the offer. That's definitely one example of a term. Okay. Anything else you guys can think of? Maybe if I give an example, maybe that can help more. Let's say we're under contract. I'm working with my buyer. And Elizabeth, she's working with the seller. We've had the inspection done during that first buyer due diligence period. And it comes back that some repairs are absolutely necessary on the property. The inspector will have kind of like items to look at, items that aren't that important to get fixed right away to move forward, and other items that are like red flag items that need to be addressed, right? Let's say in this situation, one thing is there's low, I've been through this, there's low water pressure in the home throughout the entire property, right? And the inspector said this needs to be looked at because there's low water pressure. And he's obviously not someone that's going to fix things. And he says, I think there's something going on with this regulator in the property. So what are some options that I might have when I reach out to Elizabeth as the listing agent of ways in which we can move forward in the transaction still? What are some things I can ask for here by way of options for the seller? What do you guys think when it comes to terms? Hard questions today. I know. Making you guys think. So
I think
much.
they're harder just because we don't have these
I
experiences.
know.
And we haven't even
yeah.
been in the situation.
I know. So think from the standpoint of like, I have an accepted price point, right? We came under contract under a price point. What do you guys think? And I just want you to think abstractly through this. What are some things that I can present as a way in which we can move forward where my buyers would be satisfied about?
Would we be able to have like a quote on the broken thing, or like a quote from a plumber that we can, have included to be able to, reduce the price by the cost of whatever this plumber?
Perfect. That's one of them. Well done. So they would need to, as the buyer, I can price out repairs where parts need to be replaced, and then I can include that in an addendum and say, hey, these repairs need to be made, or you just said, kind of gave away another one, but you just said reduce the purchase price by this amount for us to be able to cover those repairs ourselves. One option for sure, and that's done quite often. What else? Any other options here?
I wish I had a rep in front of me right now.
I know. Well, let's just think if I put myself in the place of a buyer, what I would want in order to move forward. One is the seller reduces the purchase price, or in closing costs can reduce or put money towards closing costs, so I have that money to use towards repairs myself. One area, of course, is I can say, I would like this fixed, and we're going to extend out the buyer due diligence deadline so you guys can fix it, and then we have the inspector come through again, or we check it out again to make sure the water pressure is back up, and then we can move forward. So we're extending out the buyer due diligence time frame to get the seller to fix it. That's one option. Anything else you guys can think of? I realize some of you haven't been through this process, so it's hard to think of it, but it's really training ourselves to kind of look at different options and not say a simple no, black and white, like Elizabeth was saying, where we give options instead of a simple no. So they could do the repairs themselves. Sometimes the buyer, if they find out it doesn't cost that much, it's not that big of a deal to them. They may even say, we love this house so much, we're worried that the sellers won't want to move forward, and they have like 5 people behind me with backup offers. We're willing to pay it ourselves to get it fixed. If the sellers, unfortunately, it's the seller's market if they aren't working with us. We can even say, you guys take care of repairs. We don't need the fridge any longer. You can take the fridge with you. There's a lot of different things, but one necessary component to this is what I always recommend in negotiation. One, you have to have everything in writing. However, I will first reach out to the listing agent to help lead them along in what my buyers think and what our needs are, right? So a lot of times in the negotiation process, I'll say, hey, our buyers still want to move forward with this. They came through and the inspector came through and said that this is a red flag item. And a lot of times, even with the listing agent, I say, what is your recommendation of a way in which we can move forward? What are your sellers willing to do here so that we can move to closing? And you'd be surprised, a lot of times when I pose that question, depending on the agent I'm working with or the other party, they may give a response that's better than I could ever think of, like in our favor.
So just work together for the resolution. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So you'll notice that with the other agent, I'll say, hey, my buyers are still really excited about moving forward on this home. There's just a couple items that need to be addressed, right? That the inspector said. The other things they're willing to take care of themselves, or it's not as much of a big deal. One of those items is the water pressure regulator. And they came through and saw that it's not working as it should. What's your recommendation that we can still move to closing that your sellers are willing to do so we can get this done and my buyers can move forward? So I'm getting them to align with the end goal of us closing on the property soon, right? I say,
But you are referring to, you know, something that's already been signed and they're in the due diligence and it's within the due diligence. So 9 times out of 10, would you say, I don't know the industry well enough, but 9 times out of 10, wouldn't you feel like they would be a little bit more flexible just because they don't want to have to go back, start over at number 1 when we're already in number 7, right?
Yeah.
Is that typically what happens?
Yeah, so you have to weigh out every situation. As I've mentioned, us being in a seller's market, there are times when maybe they're thinking all of a sudden about that offer that was 5,000 over my offer, if I propose that. So it's really important that we ask questions and build rapport with all parties first, right? So there are situations in which I'll come back with, this is something my buyers would like. Please share with your sellers and let me know, and I, of course, have it in writing. Typically, though, I'll go through it verbally with the other agent, then send it to them in writing so they're prepared for it. I want them to read it through the filter I'm creating for them, right? So let me give an example of this, and I know we're kind of going down this rabbit hole, but this is important. I could reach out to this listing agent a multitude of ways, but let's take 2 extremes. One is I send an addendum. I just email it over to the agent and I text them and say, please confirm you received this addendum with these items that need to be fixed. They get this addendum and there's like 9 things on there that I'm basically saying this must be fixed. And then I say by this date, and we want an extension with our buyer due diligence to this time to see that these things are done, right? Or I contact the agent, and this is the other option. I contact the agent and I say, hey, there were a few items that came up, and I think both of us knew that this being an older home. Some of these items the inspector brought up, and it's not as much of a big deal to my buyers. You know, it's something that they can take care of easily. However, there were about 8 or 9 things that were a concern to them, and we'd like to work with you on getting these things fixed so we can hurry and get to a fast closing. I'm about to send these things over to you. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. Do you think that listing agent would read through that addendum differently in option B as opposed to option A? Yeah. So this kind of goes into what you were saying, Dominique. It goes into if we're building rapport with not only our own clients, but other agents, and we're both working towards a solution. You'll find many times that the other side, it's not just, especially with me working new construction, the buyers would get upset about things, but I swear the buyer's agent would just be rocket fuel for their emotions and be like, I can't believe this developer's doing this to us and all that stuff, even though we may explain that this is what the process is. And it just makes the situation that much more difficult to move forward. Right? So that's where leadership and negotiation ties in hand in hand. I'm going to share with you guys here a couple things, a couple rules to negotiation. And if you guys have questions, feel free to let me know. This is in the participant guide. So on the Trello board, if you go under Ignite and go to the negotiation side, you can also go into KW Connect and pull it up by going into the search bar with Ignite. But I'm going to share with you the same participant guide that you guys should see my screen?
Mhm.
Okay, cool. So let's go down here. So this is going into a couple terms that we can use when we talk about price and terms through negotiation. So it says during negotiation process, price and terms are common points in negotiation. We introduce kind of closing costs when it comes to repairs. So it defines here for you what these terms are. Traditionally paid by the buyer, closing costs are in addition to the purchase price. Securing the cash to pay these expenses can be difficult for some, especially for first-time home buyers. So maybe they have to bring more to the closing table, and they've already put a lot into their deposit on the home, and it's difficult for them to bring additional costs. So perhaps if the seller were to say, hey, we'll put this much towards closing costs for you guys to take care of the repairs yourselves, instead of us doing the repairs, that's something the buyers may appreciate. So closing dates, when the seller has a very specific time frame for moving, the buyer has the upper hand and can leverage this by being more flexible with the closing date and less flexible with the offer price, right? So let's say there's two offers in. One offer is $5,000 over ours. However, the seller has to move with their job to St. George within 3 weeks. Then I have my lender reach out to them and say, listen, these buyers have a very strong pre-approval, and I see no reason why we can't close in 3 weeks. All of a sudden, our offer seems much more appealing than maybe another offer with even a higher closing or a higher offer price. Makes sense? So I'm going to let you read through these things. Conveyances. So conveyances, those are, keep in mind, this is a form or this participant guide is put out on a national level. So this can go into fixtures. We were talking about this, Dominique, like a refrigerator, washer, dryer, things like that. General rule of thumb is that attached fixtures stay with the home, and non-realty items, personal property, go with the seller. In negotiations, buyer may request that certain personal property items stay with the home. In luxury properties where someone has like staged this property, or they have furniture people absolutely love, a conveyance could be, we would absolutely love your living room furniture to stay. Can we get you to include that if we go back up on the purchase price? Right? Earnest money, repairs, those are things that we brought up. We did bring up some of these questions already. Here's a couple rules when we're reaching out to people. Now, when I'm preparing to negotiate with someone, whether my client or the other agent, first, a couple things you need to know. One, know your goal. Know the outcome that you're going for. What is the win-win on both sides that you can really work together with? The other is know your client or know the individual you're reaching out to. A lot of times I've like Googled or found out how many deals another agent has done to find out if they're experienced or not, right? So just to know like who I might be dealing with. Also, if they're asking questions, right? I know in that initial call when I'm about to put an offer and I compliment the listing agent on this beautiful property they've listed, I'm sure you're getting a lot of interest. And I asked them, other than price point, what's most important to your seller in the sale of this property? I'm learning a lot about this listing agent that I'm going to work with. If they're very clipped and to the point, I know that going forward, my communication is going to be very to the point, and I'm going to take into account their time and all that's going on, right? I'm going to appear much easier to work with if I'm not talking too much and making things complicated. Let's see, think ahead. Obviously, when I say think ahead, it's when I propose this, how likely will they be to respond in this manner based on my proposition? So am I prepared for this? Set expectations. This is part of leadership itself also. When I say, listen, I want to move to a closing, or I want to move to the settlement table as quickly as possible and get you guys everything you want, these are a couple things to pay attention to moving forward, right? Or these are potential issues when I'm working with my clients, or this is the process of purchasing a home. This is the market we find ourselves in. We need to come in very aggressive for this reason. So I'm setting expectations, right? Also be informed. This goes into what we had said before. If I'm not informed enough, at least have the resources that I can go to that Elizabeth has said, but also be informed when it comes to the REPSI. I'm telling you guys right now, the more you learn the REPSI, there will be a day where you come back and you're like, Chris, thank you for telling me to learn the REPSI. This gave me the upper hand entirely in this deal. One thing, and I'm being forthright with you guys and candid with you on this, in 1.4, I believe it's 1.4 still, it's water rights and water shares. And it's so funny when I'm working with a developer or builder and we're putting an offer on a property and these people get representation to sell the home to us. Of course, my client is looking for upper hand here, and a huge expense to them can be water shares when they're putting in a new development and we're tearing down these homes. And what's so funny to me is I swear it's like 1 out of every 3 times the buyer's agent for the seller's agent comes back to me, the listing agent, and says, hey, we need to work something out with their water shares and water rights. And then I say, well, on the REPSI, it clearly states water shares and water rights are included with this transaction. You didn't exclude those in the offer. And then you hear this long pause and like air coming out. They're like, you know, and they want to work out a bill of sale or something, and it's already included. That gave us a huge upper hand and saved my clients a lot of money. Okay. Let's see. So also, of course, obeying the laws. We have a fiduciary responsibility to our clients, right? So we definitely, it's not one of those things we can say, well, I didn't know. It's important that as agents, we know the laws and we're following those laws. So not doing anything underhanded or under the table or being dishonest, right, through the process. In presenting the offer or when we're negotiating on the other side, I'd already mentioned this, but call the agent. Call them first. I gave an example of preparing them of how they're going to read the addendum or my counter that I'm sending their way, right? So they're already prepared for it. They, in a way, and through my conversation with them, they know how to present that to their own client, right? Pay attention to nonverbal cues. If there's a pause, if there's something going on, being able to say, like, it sounds like that's something that is concerning to you. Am I right about that? What is concerning about that? So not just talking the whole time. If Dominique makes a very confused facial expression, I stop what I'm saying and I say, Dominique, what do you think about that? Or what are your thoughts, right? This is so important, guys. Keep quiet when you present the offer. Why is that important? Why are pauses important in effective communication, especially when presenting an offer?
In case they have a question.
Yeah, that's great. What else? So maybe they don't understand what's going on or they need further explanation. What's another reason we want to pause?
Like besides the obvious, like allowing them the opportunity to absorb
Yeah.
and accept.
If I'm talking most of the time, who knows the most about the other party? The one who's talking the most or the one who's not talking the most?
The one that's not talking knows most about the conversation because the other person's.
Yeah. So you guys obviously know more about me today in the negotiation class than I know about you. But it's absolutely important that we know when to pause and to let people process things and to let them catch up. And like someone said, ask a question or say where they have a hang up. Have you guys been in a presentation before where someone just, and don't say right now, but where someone just keeps going and going and going, and you're just like, I can't wait for this to be over. I don't understand this at all. One of those parts is when we present a CMA to people in the listing presentation. We make things so complicated and we don't shut up and say, what do you think about that? Or do you have any questions about that? Usually people say no to the questions, but usually if we say, what do you think about that? Or what are your thoughts? You know, that's going to allow us to know what the other person is thinking and know how to better figure out the win-win on their side. Does that make sense? Like, a lot of times agents, they talk so much and they're the me monsters. Me. I've been in the business this long. I'm so great. I've done these many transactions. They can have another agent that's been in the business a week, ask them what's most important to them, shares with them an action plan to get them what they want, and they say that's the person that's going to make it happen. Right? And that goes back to why asking the right questions is so important. This goes into the second portion in pauses and why they're so good. By the way, one of the most uncomfortable pauses for agents, I have to put this out there, is when they're ready to sign the paperwork. Like, for some reason, we build up so much anxiety around that, and it's natural, okay? So the first time you do your listing presentation, you get to that part, you're like, now we're just gonna go through the paperwork. I find one of a myriad of things can happen. What usually happens is the agent keeps talking forever, and they allow the person to bring up an objection, or they start explaining away the paperwork so they don't think it's a big deal, but in doing it that way, the seller thinks it's a big deal. And what I mean by that is, so we're going to go through this paperwork. I don't want you to be nervous about it. I'm just going to go through each of the line items. If there's something you don't understand, that's okay. Just tell me. But I promise, like, this is just something I have to do. Not a big deal, like I said. Just takes a few minutes. If you don't understand it, I can leave it with you and then follow up with you tomorrow. If I built up a lot of anxiety with this person around paperwork and signatures and stuff like that?
Yes.
Yeah. So now when I get to this stage and I say, great, I shared with you what market we're going to approach, my action plan to make sure we bring the most this market's willing to pay in the least amount of time. Now we just have some paperwork to go through. Pause. Usually what I do is I look down on my tablet, or I start getting the paperwork out of my bag. And especially if there's like a couple there in front of me at the table, I'm allowing them to look at one another. I'm allowing them to talk. Typically what happens, especially if there's a couple I'm meeting with, one person is more sold on me than the other individual. I found that in that situation, as long as I shut up and don't say anything and I wait for them to ask a question, typically I'm going to win out and they're going to sign the paperwork. And here's what I mean by that. This is what happens, okay? I say, great, just like I said, this is our action plan to get started. So excited to work with you. This is a very fun process. Let me get the paperwork. So I'm getting the paperwork out, and then they're like, oh, so we were going to interview other agents, but he's just getting the paperwork out. So one of two things is going to happen. One, like the individual that likes me the most, they're going to look at each other and they're going to go through it right then and there. And that individual typically wins out by saying, what do you say we just get started? And then the other one's going to be like, well, what about this? We said we were going to meet with so-and-so. And then the individual who likes me and likes what I've presented is going to say, well, why don't we just get started? Like Chris said, we'll just call him. He can contact him for us. I've done that before. That's a fun call where I contact the agent and say they signed with me. They asked me to reach out to you and let you know. So, but typically that person wins out because that other individual that may think like we need more time or need to think about this doesn't exactly want to bring up all these objections in front of me. So they go ahead and work with me. The second thing that can happen is they say, well, what about this? So they may have one minor objection before moving forward, and I can address it quickly, and then we just sign the paperwork. I'm taking extra time to explain this because it's important. That's an important place for a pause. That's where I present something that's probably the most important for me to get more business or not to have much business. And I say, now we're going to review the paperwork. Okay.
Well, what you're referring to is the assumptive close, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, you're assuming the sale. You're like, okay, well, let's go ahead and get this paperwork done.
I think I'm pretty much assumptive close like 100% of the time.
Yeah,
So
well, and
we're gonna meet.
if you haven't mastered or learned about the assumptive.
Yeah. And if I
I'm
keep
sorry?
talking, does that show a lack of confidence? The answer is yes. If I keep saying like, not a big deal, please sign with me. We talked about it this morning, right, Elizabeth? Like I close, but I keep talking. That's when I like talk them out of the sale.
Yeah.
Right? So,
Yeah.
go ahead. Yeah.
All right. I have a class at 1, so
Thanks, Dominique. It's a
you.
Zoom day for you. Okay. So a couple last
Dominique.
things to wrap up with. Listen carefully. And what's interesting is I always thought I was a good listener until I started repeating back things to people. So what I hear you saying is, or if I understand you correctly, or it sounds like what's most important to you is ... and I rephrase it. I've actually found that one of two things happens. Either someone says, no, that's not what I was thinking at all. Or I have rephrased it properly, but they say, actually, now that I think about it, that's not it. This is our real issue. So it's important that we do that and we realize how effective of a listener we really are. Be okay with the pause. And then this is very important. All of these are important. I keep saying that about every one of these. This is very important. Stay calm and relaxed. Why might that be so important? Obvious question, I know, but I want to hear from you guys. Why is it important that we stay calm and relaxed throughout maybe highly charged emotional situations?
Because you never want to transfer that wrong emotion. It's all transfer of emotions at that point, and you really don't want any anxiety that you're having for your personal reasons to come up off on the deal.
Yeah. What's interesting is a lot of times we think if I get really upset about this and I'll show them, I think that that'll diffuse the situation. I think the other person in my mind will say, I'm sorry, Chris, I was so wrong. I am so wrong, Chris. I'm sorry. How often does that happen, really? Almost never. All it does is it fuels it even more, and then both sides diverge even more and more from one another, right? It also, going back to the confidence side, it shows confidence that this is something that I've been through before and I'll get through it again. It really helps. And this is typically the point when someone else is really emotional, that I'll reintroduce the solution or I'll realign them with where we're going. This is what it sounds like. There are plenty of people in the business that have that bulldozer personality. They're used to, from a very young age, maybe they were the only child. No offense to any one of you here if you're the only child, but they were the one who they didn't like the baby food they got, and their parents will always like never gave them that baby food again. And then from that age on up, they knew every time they had a temper tantrum that people would secede and they would, give them what they wanted. I had one agent that like started going off, and I just stopped him. I said, listen, I have no interest in having a conversation like this because it's just us talking at one another. If this isn't going to work out, that's totally fine. My seller and I can work with another party going forward. I want what's best for you guys. I would want you to buy this property, but I have to know we can work together. Why don't you take a minute and then get back to me if you'd like to continue with this? So I'm getting them to realign what we want to close on this property. We would like to do it with you guys. Once that individual realized right off the bat that I was calm and that was only making things worse, and I said, if you drop this language again on me, I'm hanging up. And they knew that this isn't working. And then, of course, this same person, I can't promise it's always this way, called me back like 5 minutes later. And I'm sure they were thinking, oh my gosh, my emotion just blew up this deal. And I'm going to have to tell my buyer that we can't move on this property. And then he called me back and he's like, he was very professional about it. He said, that was very unprofessional of me. I'm sorry I got really wrapped up in it. And I said, no problem. Let's get going. Okay. And then you talked about this morning, Elizabeth. Desperation stinks, right? So focus on the customer's needs, no commission breath, right? So when we make it about us, we're no longer able to lead because they don't feel that we have their best interest, right? It sounds desperate. It sounds like, will you please sign the contract? Please sign the contract.
I'm begging you.
Yeah.
I need groceries.
It is one of the most sickening things for me in the world when someone comes from that pathetic side of, I need this commission. Like, I've got to feed my family. It could be true, could very well be.
You've lost respect.
Exactly. Yeah. So make it about the other individual. And that's, again, when we ask the right questions and help them move through the process.
Well, and that's what we signed, right? To put their interests ahead of ours. Like that's.
Yeah, most definitely. And going with that, though, we have to know, and this is why we script every morning. This is why we learn how to communicate that I really am putting your interests first. Asking questions the right way, upswing, downswing. Tell me more about that. Sympathizing with their situation. Keeping a calm demeanor, being excited about providing something of value to them that's going to make their life better. How do they make their life better? That's leadership and negotiation. So that's what I have today. I hope that this has been beneficial to you guys. I will say, refer to the participant guide. It has a lot of these steps that I've provided. That's great. Another thing that I almost forgot, I'm going to pull up one other thing here, and it'll open up to you guys again. If you have questions or thoughts or concerns, anything at all, feel free to let me know.
Real quick, I'm sorry, the participants guide. What are you referring to? Because I will tell you, I got a 10-day in notification, and it was referring me to, it's like the, hey, you've been here 10 days. I just want to verify these things, right? And I wasn't able to pull up the link.
No problem. So this is different. Through these classes, there's both a video that you can watch. I'm starting to record these classes, so you have a couple videos. You have both the video done by me and also done by National. They're having live chat conversations. You can access it on the Trello board, or you can go into KW Connect and do a search. But you'll find in every one of those discussions, they have a participant guide where you can take part. And that's what I was sharing with you guys just now. So let me share this with you. Sorry.
Oh, hi, hello.
So when you go to, this is what it looks like on KW Connect, and it's essentially a link directly to this on the Trello board. So there is an Ignite class, so it's beyond the Trello board under that column, under negotiation. And if you click on that tab, it'll show you both the link to the video or videos, as well as the participant guide. You can even find it if I scroll down here. You guys can see my screen, right? With KW Connect.
Yes, yes.
If I scroll down, you'll see this at the bottom under the Ignite Lab Elemental 7 Negotiate the Deal. There's a hyperlink there, and that's going to be the actual participant guide that I shared. So you'll have that as well as the video to watch. What I liked about this, if you go back to watch this video, she does a good job of it. I didn't have a chance to explain it, but there's a lot of nonverbal cues that we use. This is something I'm very guilty of, because I'm not sure if you guys are aware of this. I am not the most patient person. My wife will completely disagree with me. She'll say I'm the most patient person there ever was. That's a lie. Actually, she'll say I'm very impatient. But if you go to the video here, it's pretty cool. They share in face-to-face nonverbal cues, what that looks like. So positive open gestures, sitting back, open palms, right? I actually, when we go door to door, I always make sure my hands aren't in my pocket or behind my back. Whether someone's nervous about that or not, we're actually conditioned where that makes us nervous. And you'll see effective presenters always show their hand out like this. Okay.
Do you know what another thing is too, is this.
Yeah.
It shuts you off and shows that you're not open for communication.
Yeah. I do that when I'm bored. And sometimes I'm like this, and I'll say, oh.
I know, me too. I'm like,
Yeah. So, and then negative, you said it perfectly. Face-to-face negative, nonverbal cue, crossed arms, lack of eye contact. These are things I'm trying to work at, because I'm always like, what's next? What's next? I'm excited about something, I may speak faster about it, right? I just saw this movie, you gotta see it, it's amazing. Right?
You say that again?
I just saw this movie, it's amazing, you gotta see it. Like, I may have a faster pace of speech.
Oh.
Right? It's a swift pace of speech. Negative over the phone. And this is the hard part. If some people communicate this way, maybe they do feel excited about something, but if they have, someone may interpret it as negativity where they're monotone, flat voice, loud tone. That's interesting. So that's like where I'm being aggressive, abrupt, or especially slow speech. Right? So I'm cutting people off. This is where I shared that this personality, link. If you guys do that, you're going to learn there's certain personalities. If you interrupt them, it is the worst thing you could ever do. The expressive personality, you do not interrupt them ever, ever. It's like they will write you off forever, right? Because they're expressive. They want to express what it is they have to say. So that's where it's really interesting. I would recommend, if you haven't already, take that DISC test. We're going to have a class on that, and it goes into communication styles and other things like that too. Yeah, Elizabeth.
I took it today and I prompted Levi to take it as well. And we were going to share the information. Where does that information come from? Neither of us got an email.
Yeah, it goes to staff, and then typically that DISC personality thing, that what we use is very effective, but it goes to us so that presenters can meet with the participants and share it with them. We're doing it a little bit differently, where now when they get that notification, I'm just sending it to you guys. I want you to review it. Keep in mind it's from a presenter's standpoint.
Sure.
Review it, and then we're going to go over it together in a class. Everyone's going to bring it.
Okay, so just so that you know, Levi and I took it today.
Awesome. I'm going to look for it. I can't wait to see it. Ooh, I can't wait to see it.
Because we were going to meet.
Yeah.
We were going to meet together and kind of talk it, and go over our results. So.
Yeah, I can't wait. So Josh, yeah, look for that email. I think I sent it. Elizabeth sent me a good reminder last week, like before Thanksgiving. So I think it's just before Thanksgiving.
I want to say it was Monday. I think it was before my dad died. I think it was Monday that you resent that out.
Gotcha. So guys, thanks for joining me today. We're here at 201. Have a great day. Let me know how I can help you out. And that's negotiation.
Thank you.
Have a good one. Thank you.